Hello and welcome to Hare and the Hawthorn. My name's Kate Ray. I'm not going to make any stupid puns about my partner in crime and my co-host. As always, I have Dr. Neil Rushton with me, who's just getting himself sorted out.
Sorry.
Are we done? Are we good?
I'm ready to go.
Ready to rock and roll. I have pre-warned Neil that there is going to be a bit of a ramble from me to start off with. I've got lots to get through, lots that I'm excited about.
Well, you get on with that.
Oh, you've really thrown me there. You've proper thrown me. Lots of exciting things have been happening. And what I'm going to talk about is all going to be relevant and tied up with today's theme of conversation, which is about what we've been reading, doing a brief review of a couple of books that we've been reading. But first and foremost, something very, very important. It's a public service announcement to all you regular viewers. And it has been something that has been questioned on a few occasions. And I think we ought to turn this into a game. Neil's got no idea what I'm going on about.
Well, get on it.
So it's nothing bad, Neil, don't worry. But it is about you. So there has been questions asked about what Neil has in his goblet. Could you show said goblet? The famous Hare in the Hawthorn goblet. There we go. So here's the game. So here's the game. There have been a few guesses already about what Neil drinks from the said goblet. Oh, this could go really badly wrong. This could go really badly wrong. Those guesses have been wrong so far. So my question to you is, over the ensuing months when you're seeing us online, have a guess what he's drinking. Pop it in the comments and say what you think Neil may be drinking from the goblet. Me, I'm going to be frank with you. Mine is always a cup of tea. There's a clue.
Okay, I'll just get one thing out of the way. It's not ayahuasca.
That would be so interesting. No, it wouldn't.
I wouldn't be looking at the screen if it were.
Because that's exactly what you do on an ayahuasca. I know it is. People go around going. Anyway, I'm a bit excited. Well, I'm a bit overtired. I have spent the weekend in Fairyland. And it feels like only 2 minutes ago that we were all back in Fairyland back in October, where we did Karen Kay's Fairy Fair and ball, although Neil welshed out on doing the ball because his ball gown was still in the dry cleaners. So I went and stood stall, as I do regularly at Karen's events, and ended up going to the ball again. This time I didn't have a ball gown on. Not that this is probably FYI. I went as a sort of dirty little pixie. I think I was channeling something very weird that night. There's a few photos that have come out that look nothing like me. It's very, very strange. However, I was joined by the lovely Jo Hickey Hall, who's a very good friend of mine and Neil's, and also a very close friend of ours is Rob Wildwood, who joined us that evening. And we had a really good night dancing around to bagpipe music, which Neil said before we came on, I couldn't think of anything worse. And if you'd have said that to me, a week ago, that I'd be dancing to bagpipe music, I would have said the same. It's got to be my worst instrument. It's pretty awful, isn't it? It's pretty awful. And I'm hoping I've got it right that they were playing bagpipes, because I'm going to be corrected by somebody and say, no, it wasn't bagpipes. It was a different kind of pipe. But yeah, it was a great night. There is relevance to this. So on the Sunday, I think it was, Rob Wildwood came and found me at the fair and said, do you know that you're in the latest edition of Fae Magazine? So Fae Magazine, for those who don't know, is Karen Kay's magazine that comes out, which is basically all about fairies and different aspects of fairies. So I was quite excited about this. And I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this. Just in the bottom there is a photo of me holding the book that Neil and myself and Jo Hickey Hall and many others wrote for Dr. Simon Young. So that's one book link. It gets better. So in the magazine, flicking through, on the very next page, one of my all-time favourite books, have promoted and reviewed this before, and I will promote it and promote it and promote it. It's brilliant. Is Rob Wildwood's Magical Britain. So there's a review on that book in there. Flick back down the videos, you'll see my review on that. Anybody who's into mystical, magical places within the British Isles, you need this book in your car at all times. It's brilliant. It's like an adult treasure hunt. It's brilliant. So flicking further on, and who else is in there? It's like a who's who in the fairy world. It's the lovely Jo Hickey Hall, talking about modern fairy sightings, but also looking at two of my favourite books on the first page, which is Seeing Fairies by Marjorie Johnson and Passport to Magnolia. Now, do I say that? Oh, there it is. I don't say that right, do I? Magonia?
Magonia.
That's it. My dyslexic brain. My dyslexic brain. There is also, and this is the link to the next thing I'm going to talk about, Jo talks about the fairy census. So lots of book links there. So already we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books that viewers can buy out of just that one magazine that I would highly recommend, and I'm sure you would too, Neil.
Well, hold on a minute. Why wasn't I in there? I'm absolutely outraged.
Well,
I've been cut out.
No, you haven't. I actually think I've got a few ideas to take to Karen about some things. So watch this space. I think we should all be on the front cover, looking like the draggled fairies of the fairy world. Because let me tell you, all these front covers and the back cover and look at this. Look at this. Absolutely beautiful imagery. And oh, look, I didn't even know. We've got Brett Manning. Fantastic artist, Brett Manning. But I mean, look at the photo shoots. They're absolutely gorgeous. We'd just look like a drunken band of pixies that had crawled out of a hedgerow if we were on that front cover. Is that speak for yourself, Kate?
Exactly. Speak for yourself, darling.
I don't know, with the growing beard there, Neil.
Yeah. All right. Whatever.
Pick a few twigs in. Anyway, that takes me to the next exciting thing. So this literally just landed through my doorstep today, which I just thought, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. So I'm going to have to calm down a minute. I am excitable. So for those of you who don't know, this is going to be 2 plugs of shameless promotion here, but I'm a writer for Haunted Magazine. I've written for them for about 6 years now, and I've only generally missed maybe 3 editions where I haven't written for them. And I do write loosely about the fairies, fairy places, witchcraft, herbs, that kind of thing. So this edition of Haunted Magazine, I'm going to hold it up, and you can order this online. There is stockists around the country, and WH Smith's, there's some WH Smiths that stock Haunted Magazine. If you type in Haunted Magazine, you'll be able to get a copy. It's a brilliant read. There's some fantastic writers in here, a lot of which I know really well personally, who are lovely, lovely people. And I do really enjoy this. And I know Thomas Sheridan, our friend Thomas Sheridan, has commented that he likes Haunted Magazine. So moving on from Jo Hickey Hall's mention about the census, I wrote an article. Look at that headline. I didn't write that headline, but it's genius. I love the boys for their sense of humour. So I wrote about the importance of Simon Young's fairy census and how it could be mirrored, I suppose, in the research that goes off within the haunted community, in the paranormal community. So that's another great read for people out there. That is a shameless plug for Haunted Magazine. So it doesn't just include ghosts. It has a plethora of paranormal content in there: fairies, UFOs, cryptids, etc. So it's a good all-round read. But if you don't like the spooky side of stuff, it can get quite deep and dark with stuff like that. And another link in there, my first publishers have also got a article in the magazine, which brings me on to a little story time. I'm sorry I'm rambling, Neil. I did say I was going to.
I could have come in. I could have come in 10 minutes later. You
I
you just get on with it.
know.
You carry on. I'll just get my hair sorted out, darling.
Okie dokie, you carry on with that. You carry on with that. So, a little bit of a story time. My book, Woolly Snots, The Curious Case of the Woollerton Gnomes, came out less than a year ago. It was published less than a year ago, and my publishers, Mark and Anna Jones, were absolutely fantastic, absolutely amazing publishers. Coached me through my first book. They were brilliant. They were very supportive and loved the work that I was doing, and I can't thank them enough for that. However, they retired. They decided, that they'd had enough. I'd been the breaking point for them, I think, of it was too much like hard work. So they have retired from a lot of their duties, and one of their duties that they've retired from is the publishing house. Which left me in a bit of a quandary about what to do and where to go. And hey, presto, things fell in place, and the guys from Haunted Magazine were looking to expand out into publishing. And we now have the very swanky second edition,
Fantastic.
which
Fantastic.
I've just opened this morning. This is, can you hear that? It's a hardback. But you can get it in hardback, and I specifically requested, just because I wanted a hardback. I love hardback books. You can get it in hardback and paperback now on Amazon. There will be some direct from me at some stage that you'll be able to get signed if you want to, but I am on Amazon. So I've got mixed feelings about that. It's great that people can access it who are not in the country. It's a big giant, so it sits a little funny with me, but that's by the by. It's there, it's out there. And I am really excited about this kind of new chapter in the endeavours, and and a new relationship with a new publisher. So that's all my shameless promotion and all my rambling. And I think we should get to the heart of the matter, and me to shut up a minute and look at doing some book reviews.
Yeah, but I've forgotten what I was supposed to be talking about. You've gone on so long.
I'm sorry.
Congratulations on that. I hadn't realised that had actually reached the bookshelves. And like you say, hardback and paperback. I'm sure it'll be reasonably priced on Amazon. And I get what you're saying about Amazon, but like it or loathe it, there is absolutely no doubt, as I found out with my own books, almost everything that was sold on Amazon.
Yeah.
And without it, I'd have been lucky to get into double figures. But with it, yeah, those are most of the sales. So yeah, I know what you mean. It's just there's so little competition, proper competition for it. Even some of the other big booksellers just don't compete with Amazon. People just go by, they've got used to going straight onto Amazon, myself included. I have to admit, sometimes,
Me too.
the first place I think, oh right, I need to find this book. Let's go onto Amazon. Not great, not a great situation. But congratulations anyway. That's
Thanks.
fantastic. I hope you get some more punters in there, because it is, I beta read it before it was published the first time and did some copy editing, and it's a great read. It's a great read. It's not what you expect it to be. And I think we've talked about it briefly before about how, is it a children's book? Sort of, but it's not really. An adult will see the sort of deeper resonances of it. And I think I compared it before to Watership Down, which is not a children's book. If only it would sell as many copies as Watership Down.
That would be brilliant. That would be brilliant.
Yeah. No. Then you'd be a millionaire, and you'd never want to know me. I'd get sacked.
You would not get sacked. I wouldn't sack you.
You'd be, oh, you're beneath me now. Anyway, it's not going to happen. So, talking talking about hardback books.
Yes.
I like hardback books as well. It's that they're going to last, and you know that they are. Yeah, they just feel better in the hand, don't they? Yeah, even though they're heavier and everything. But it's.
I'm gonna say something sacrilege now. I am gonna say something sacrilege. I like cracking a spine.
Yeah, you're a monster.
I am a monster. I don't deliberately do it, but when you get halfway through a book and you've been holding it and you just get that kick from the spine, and it's just.
I know what you mean. Well, okay, so today we are both going to just briefly review. Certainly in my case, this is only going to take about 10 minutes or so, just to go through a book that has had some influence on me and that I think is very interesting and probably not very well known. And that book is The Kingdom of the Gods by Geoffrey Hodgson. Now, in our last podcast, if you remember when we were talking about the Cottingley Fairies, I talked about Geoffrey Hodgson. He's got quite a big part to play in the story of the Cottingley Fairies, and both Kate and I have written articles for Simon Young's new book coming out in the summer on the Cottingley Fairies, and I went into a little bit of detail on Geoffrey Hodgson and actually found out a lot about the guy. Like, I'm not going to go into his biography. I mentioned it last time, but the fact that he was born in the 1880s, and at the very end of the First World War, he was a tank commander in the field. He was fighting in the end of the First World War as a tank commander in 1918, and then 3 years later he's in Cottingley with the two girls, Elsie and Frances, looking for fairies. Amazing character. And a large number of books throughout his life. He lived into his 90s, and from the 1920s onwards he published a load of books. One of the first ones he published, and which people might like to go and find, because it's very easy to find and it's very playful. Fairies at Work and Play, and it's a lovely one. I absolutely love it. Basically, this is an intro to Geoffrey Hodgson. He doesn't go into too much depth, which I'm just going to be talking about in a moment. But for instance, the contents are brownies and elves, gnomes, mannequins, undines, fairies, sylphs, and divas, and he just talks about how his clairvoyant abilities, or his ability to put himself in an altered state of consciousness, allowed him to see these creatures. But that was in the 1920s, and in the I think this Kingdom of the Gods is 1958. This is actually a first publication, and he goes into the sort of material, the theosophical material that I'm not going to talk about here. I'm going to talk about just one section that he wrote specifically about what he calls nature spirits. Now, you've got to remember that Geoffrey Hodgson is coming from the perspective of theosophy. And although by the time he got into theosophy and started moving up the ranks, it started to split into various avenues of different types of theosophy. It got mixed up with spiritualism. Rosicrucianism became involved in theosophy, and people went off in different angles. So someone like Rudolf Steiner would go off on a completely different direction than someone like Hodgson or Ledbetter or Gardner and some of the other famous theosophists in the early 20th century. So but at the heart of theosophy is the ability of clairvoyance to see non-material entities. And this split that I'm talking about, so some theosophists will make a distinction between something like elementals and nature spirits. an actual distinction. It gets too arcane to really talk about in any detail. But Hodgson himself didn't seem to make that distinction too much. Elementals were nature spirits. We're talking about basing it on the 16th century alchemist Paracelsus, who divided them into sylphs, undines, gnomes, and salamanders, and that's the sort of basis of it. Those are the nature spirits. Now, it's very difficult to summarize this book because most of it, the major part of it, is talking about the angelic hierarchy, which is called the Sephiroth. And to be honest, it goes over my head. The language and the idea of all these different types of angels in the hierarchy, I just can't get my head quite around it, even though it's interesting to a certain point. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about just two things: how Geoffrey Hodgson describes being clairvoyant, and then I'm just going to give you one, and if I've got time, maybe two examples of him talking about the fairies. They're really interesting. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to read. It's only a paragraph, so give me a minute to tell you how Geoffrey Hodgson in Kingdom of the Gods talks about, in this case, he calls it seership, as in seer, as in second sight.
That's a nice word, that is. I like that.
Yeah, no, it's good. He uses it interchangeably with clairvoyance or second sight. So the word seems to him to mean the same thing. Now, the reason I'm reading this out is that you'll get an idea of the thickness of the language that he used. Most theosophists do, definitely Rudolf Steiner. You've usually got to read things 2 or 3 times because the first reading is, oh, this is different. This is not, I'm not used to reading this type of prose. But so just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and this is Geoffrey Hodgson describing seership. As part of the unfoldment of the human intellect into omniscience, the development occurs at a certain stage of human evolution of the faculty of fully conscious, positive clairvoyance. This implies an extension which can be hastened by means of self-training of the normal range of visual responses to include both physical rays beyond the violet and beyond them again, the light of the super-physical worlds. The mechanism of super-sensual vision and the process of its development are referred to in the descriptive matter, which I'll talk about. It is important to differentiate between the passive psychism of the medium and even the extrasensory perception of parapsychology and the positive clairvoyance of the student of occultism. This latter, completely under the control of the will and used in full waking consciousness, is the instrument of research with which during the past 30 years I've endeavored to enter and explore the kingdom of the gods.
Wow.
So so I'll break that. So just give me a breath. What do you think on hearing that first time? Do you think what the hell are you talking about, or do you think no, he's got something there?
I definitely think he's got something there. I think that I think the phrase that he used was a passive mediumship, or that kind of when you're in training with this kind of thing, with any kind of psychic training, you do go through different stages. So you go through that you're receiving things that you don't ask for, or that you have no kind of guard against. The next stage up is that you actively seek that and bring that down into your consciousness. And I would say that the next phase after that is actually stepping into that realm. And that's what I got from what he's just talked about, is that the different stages of how to reach to becoming in control of entering into those realms. And what did he call it again? Was it the super something or other that
super physical?
That's brilliant. I love that.
That's typical. Steiner uses that as well. That's kind of typical. They do use these terms, and sometimes, like I say, some of them mean slightly different things than others, but it generally means the same thing. So let me read out. So you get into a section called the Lesser Gods. The reason it's called Kingdom of the Gods is you go right from the top archangel down to what he will talk about as brownies. He uses these sort of folkloric terms sometimes, again, slightly loosely, but he's basically always talking about what he thinks of as nature spirits. And you know, a lot of people, a lot of folklorists or parapsychologists who will look into the fairy phenomenon don't necessarily like them being classed as nature spirits, but I think it's perfectly acceptable. It's obvious that they're all part of the same kind of taxonomy in a general sense. So this is interesting. I could just go on reading little sections all night long, but I will try and keep this brief so that Kate can get on to her book. And he's talking about a brownie community in the Lake District. Basically, he's gone off into the Lake District, Thirlmere, and he's on his own, and he's just taking notes and writing about the communities of non-physical entities that he sees through his adapted clairvoyance. Looking again at the Brownie community and striving to grasp some of the details of its life, certain peculiar facts present themselves. For example, an endeavour to see the inside of their houses showed to my surprise that when one went in at the door, there was nothing there. The outside shape is fairly perfect and quite picturesque, but the inside is just darkness. In fact, the illusion of a house entirely disappears when the consciousness is directed to the interior. Certain fine lines of flowing magnetism are all that one sees. The brownies enter by the door and then put off the brownie form, descending deeper into the earth in a relatively formless state. That's brilliant. They all seem to have the conception of being busy, hurrying about the place in a pseudo-serious manner. But to me, the whole thing is pure make-believe on their part.
That's brilliant.
It's just great. That's, you know, it's almost kind of talking about quantum physics, where, you know, you have a wave and it collapses into reality. This is sort of the opposite way around. He's seeing these brownies messing around, as he says, in certain, you know, in a sort of playful style outside their little houses, which he sees. And then when his consciousness attempts to get into the houses, it's just darkness. Their form has disappeared into something else. Isn't that brilliant?
It is. It's genius, and I mean, I've never ever read any of his work, but I'm definitely captivated by what you've just been through, and especially because I know you briefly explained that he talks about the hierarchy of angels and going down into sort of the lesser gods, which is very much where I'm comfortable with understanding of the spectrum of the Fae, which is going from the very, very high vibrational realms,
yes,
right the way down to the lower vibrational realms. And angelic.
He's constantly talking about vibration as
well. Yeah,
so,
brilliant.
Not in those particular pieces, but it's very much talking about. He talks about etheric vibration, the higher, lower vibrations, dark, light vibrations. That's all part of the theosophy. So that gives you does that give you a taste of where he's coming from?
I'm definitely going to buy that. I mean,
it's worth it. It's worth it. And
yeah.
I'm not going to read anything else out, but it's in this section on the lesser gods. There's an embryo rock gnome.
Wow.
The tree mannequins.
Yep.
Undines. Undines in a waterfall, dryads, lake spirits, fairies, fairy glamour. I was going to read something out, but it's a bit too long for that. And it's brilliant. That section alone is just, if that were an essay on its own, it would be brilliant. And there are a load of, because this was published by the Theosophical Society, who have loads of money. It's a beautifully produced book, and there are illustrations by someone called Ethelwyn Quayle.
And what a name! What a name!
Ethelwyn Quayle. And just to give you an idea of what they look like, they're all very similar stylistically.
Oh, yeah.
You get that?
I tell you what, that looks like, for anybody who knows Chris Fleming, the American psychic clairvoyant medium. I don't know what umbrella. Sorry if I got it wrong. But his artwork, he goes into the realms of doing artwork very, very similar to that. That's intriguing. That is intriguing.
It's just they're all, you can see they're all similar style, and they're beautiful, all on color plates as well. They're not just sort of lumped in the text.
And that was from the artist was from the same same period then? It
Oh,
wasn't
they
that.
collaborated. She
Wow.
collaborated with Jeffrey Hodgson. And I'll just finish off by reading that picture there. So look at this. This is the tree nature spirit.
Mm.
And this, the other thing I should say about Jeffrey Hodgson, he went all over the world. He's looking at nature spirits in every kind of culture you can possibly imagine. So that picture describes a short piece of text where Jeffrey writes, "This 16-year-old warangan tree grows in a garden in Madiun in the island of Java. It was planted by the lady of the house, who became much attached to it and felt it to be a living conscious being, from whom she assured me she received a sense of friendliness and rest. When taking tea beneath its welcome shade, I became aware of the presence of this delightful tree nature spirit, or dryad. I found it to be approaching individualization, or evolution out of group into individualized consciousness." I love this language.
Yeah.
"And to be well aware of the affection of the owner of the tree and responsive to it, which would beneficially affect its development. This nature spirit is approximately 5 feet tall." So there you go.
Brilliant.
That's the kingdom of the gods, Jeffrey Hodgson. And obviously, as you can realize, I've only just touched the surface there because of the constraints of time, and I don't want to take too much time from what Kate wants to see. And that was first published in 1952. And I thoroughly recommend it, even if the theosophical language can be a bit dense at times, and it's like, oh my God, what's he talking about? It's brilliant. 100% recommended. Nine and a
Yeah.
half out of 10.
Yeah, I love that. I love the bits that you read out as well. It was yeah, very much in line with like I say, with my understanding of how that all works. So it was nice to hear. And I quite like having to take the time to unpick people's sentences and terminology, especially when it's not from our era and the language is different and slightly alien, and especially the rhythm of the grammar and that kind of thing. It's a totally different pace to a lot of modern writing. But I like it, and I tell you, the book that came to mind when you were talking about that, about the different, the maybe that kind of slight barrier, is our friend Joshua Cutchin's book. Oh, come on,
Which one?
the big one.
Oh, his most recent one. I've forgotten that. Oh,
No,
man.
Ecology of Souls.
Ecology of Souls.
Ecology of Souls. Yes. Oh, I
Sorry,
can't.
Joshua.
But when I was reading that, I was literally having to put it down because his language is there is so much within one or two sentences
Yep,
in how he crafts his language that I would have to put it down and
yep.
and kind of mull it over. And I found myself doing that and having to sort of go, okay, it's clicked. I know this. Or I would go away and do a little bit of research about something that he'd mentioned. It's like an intertwined book of kind of setting you on research and setting you on your own thought waves. And I love that style of writing. It was definitely crafted, in the Victorian Edwardian period, wasn't it? It was definitely something that one thing that sprang to mind, and I don't know whether you came across it in your research at all. Um, do we know whether Hodgson had any kind of traumatic experience while he was serving in the army that triggered his clairvoyancy, that triggered this kind of interest? Because oftentimes when you speak to mediums or clairvoyants or seers, there's one or two schools. There's those who have said, I've always had it, it's always been with me. But more often than not, I come across people who say they've experienced a car accident that they've survived, and it took them to the edge, or some kind of hugely traumatic incident in their life, which kind of almost jolted them into seership.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
has
no,
it?
yeah, yeah, of course. The problem, well, Jeffrey Hodgson says on various occasions that he had some level of clairvoyance from a child.
Right.
Um, and so there's that, and also he was very reluctant to speak about anything that happened when he was
In the
tank
war.
commander in World War One, which is not unusual for
Yes.
for soldiers who fought in that particular conflict. So we don't know whether anything traumatic happened, but we do know that he at least he tells us that he had certain levels of clairvoyance from a child. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, the atrocities must have been absolutely beyond traumatic.
Yes.
Beyond traumatic. It was particularly brutal, I think, in terms of people on the ground and what people witnessed on the ground. You know, it wasn't pushing buttons, etc., was it? It was in the thick of it. So,
So what have you got for us, Kate?
it's
I presume something very different than Kingdom of the
very different,
Gods.
very different. Um, I glitched out there. I do apologise. So, one of the things that I do, and I have done this since a teenager, and I used to do it with choosing music as well. So I was never around people who were particularly into the same style of music as me. So I would go into an old-fashioned record store and buy something on the cover. So I'd buy something on the artwork. Don't judge a book by its cover, but I did. And I would, find what I was drawn to, have a quick scan about what was on the album, and then try it out. I mean, I had some ridiculously bad experiences, but more often than not, it kind of opened my eyes. I do this as an adult with books, and is it shameful to do that? Is it
No,
shameful?
no, no, no. I think you'll find a lot of people do that. I mean, don't judge a book by its cover. Well, you will partly.
Yes.
If it's a really great cover, you'll think, and goes for records as well. You'll think, oh my God, that's brilliant. And if it's a really naff cover, you'll think, well, if it's a naff cover, is the writing or is the music gonna be the same? Just before you go on, that exact same thing. I was a record store haunter in
Mm-hmm.
my youth. When you had vinyls and the cover of Fields of the Nephilim's first album, Dawn Raiser, with the five of them there with Carl McCoy shining. I'd never heard Fields of the Nephilim before I saw that in the record shop, and that was like, wow, look at
Yeah.
them. They are
Was that
super cool.
the one that was slightly sepia? Was that the album cover that it was slightly that sandy, goldy sepia
No, no,
colour?
that's the second one. This is. I
Ah.
wish I had a. Oh no, do I'll
We
take
should
forever.
do we should
Forever.
do we should do a record review, shouldn't we? Oh, fairy music. We were going to do one about fairy music, weren't we? So
Yeah, yeah. I don't know whether Fields of the Nephilim
well,
constitute
of
fairy
course they.
music.
Well,
Oh,
no. I think
right.
a lot of alternative music could actually come under the category of that for the creativity aspect and that whole kind of connection with muses and blah blah. Anyway, we will definitely go into that in the future because fairy music, and I'm quite passionate about it not being harps and fiddles and bells and whatever. That
Yeah,
there's much more to it.
I've taken you completely off course
You
there.
have,
Go on.
you have.
Go on.
It's not hard to do, especially when I get excited about something. So I had this popped up again. I'm sorry, on my Amazon account. It popped up because I had in my wish list lots of different books on modern folk tales. I'm not a folklorist. It's something that I kind of endeavour to broaden my horizons on. But of course, for those who know me, it's got bloody mushrooms on the front. It had to be done. It had to be done. So this book's called Hag, Forgotten Folk Tales Retold. So I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview of this. I'm not going to read anything from it because I'd like you to delve in yourself. But before I start that, one of the things, and I'm not going to talk too deeply about this because it'll get us kicked off. One of the things that came up and comes up with a review of this book, which puzzles me and makes me question things, is it was cited as some kind of feminist, accolade of a book. It's up there as a feminist piece of writing, which is wrong. It's not. It's written by women. That for me is it. And I had to take that feminism out of the equation from the reviews while reading the book, because it isn't about charging forward with feminist issues at all, because they are all centered around traditional folklore. So I couldn't have cared less whether it was male or female who wrote it, and I didn't read it in the sense that it was women writing it either. So I've got that off my chest and out of the way, and I'm not going to say any more about that because I'll get kicked off and we'll get into a whole kind of banter on the comments about what my views are on feminism. That I will say for another day and maybe another show.
Yeah, go on, do it.
No,
do it.
no. Just say I'm a little more traditional than most. So in here, let's have a look. I tell you what, the one thing that I did really like about it was, so each chapter is literally the retelling of a folk tale, and some of them are closer to the original folk tale than others. Some take an aspect or a theme from a folk tale and give it in a more modern sense, present it in a more modern sense. Some of them are a straightforward retelling, as you would if you were sat around a campfire. You embellish it with your own bits and bobs. Generally, I would say overall, every single writer had a very different style in this book, which I loved. And their understanding of language and the imagery that they were able to produce, each and every one of them was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. One of the ones in here that's retold is the Green Children of Woolpit, which is a brilliant retelling of that. Some of them I'd never come across. Some of them I had loosely come across. Some of them I had heard, but not in a sense of the Scottish version of an Irish folktale or vice versa. So that was really interesting to find out about the origins of them. And right at the end of the book, they do give the original more true folkloric tale, so you can do a comparison, and they give you a brief bit of history about that folktale, which for somebody like me is great because I can retain it a lot better. Now, two things came out of this while I was reading this. The first one is going to be another book I'll quickly talk about. One of my all-time favourite books, and one that I will never, ever, ever lend out, and I will never, ever be without, no matter where I've been or what I've done, in the world. I've always had this book with me. And it's Alexander McCall Smith's Dream Angus. And this book is one of those books that I will read if I need to sleep, literally, Dream Angus style. It's one of those books that I will read if I'm feeling uncertain about the world or unsteady about things. It takes me into the world of each of the stories. And this book, again, is chapter by chapter. It touches on or is a retelling of a traditional folk tale. And the second thing that comes out of both these books is how uncomfortable they make me. So I have this overarching love of them, of the beauty of the story and the imagery, but there is something very fragmented, and I find this with all folklore and fairy tales, that there is something that's deeply gnawing at my soul, that they're like puzzle boxes. Folklore tales are puzzle boxes, and they're not comfortable to open oftentimes, and they tap into a deep subconsciousness that I am not fully aware of. And a lot of the time, the languages and the symbolism that are represented in these tales are deep within our core, our ancestral core, that we don't really know in a modern sense. And that leaves me very uncomfortable. There's one particular story that I go back to and mull over time and time again in Dream Angus. And if you'll die, let me just, is that okay if I just briefly give you an overview of this story? Time-wise. So it's about a guy who is a fairly simple guy. He still lives with his parents, and he works in a laboratory, and he basically cleans up after the animals in a laboratory. So he will muck out animals and he'll make sure they're fed and watered, and that's his life. And he goes home and he'll have tea with his parents and goes to bed and come back, and it's set in fairly modern times. And the story kind of builds to him having a relationship with a sow, so a pig that's in this laboratory, and he feels a connection with this pig that he has to rescue it. So he kind of uses all his brain power to hatch a plan on how to get the pig out of the laboratory without being found out that it's him, etc. And this runs concurrently with a love interest. He has a keen eye on, I think it's one of the scientists. He's got a sweet spot for one of the scientists. So he rescues this pig and it all ensues, and he puts it in his dad's pigeon shed at the bottom of the garden. His parents are, I think, probably northern because they're really grumpy about it. They're like, "Oh, we're going to do it with a bloody pig, son," that kind of thing. And eventually he kind of thinks, I can't care for this pig and I can't take this pig out anywhere because it's a laboratory pig. And decides that he is going to try and take it back into the laboratory. And on his way, he's crossing fields with this pig. On his way, he comes across his love interest. And at this point, I want her to absolutely persuade him, and I want them all to run away together, and I want them to all live on a beautiful island. And the pig has piglets with a wild boar, and they have children. They live happily ever after. But this scientist persuades him that he's doing the right thing by taking the pig back. And I always find myself heartbroken, like doubly heartbroken, that he's chosen this bloody woman over this pig. That says way about me on a psychological level. But folklore does that to me. And I mull it over why that happened in the story, why it wasn't a happy ending. What does that mean on a psychological level? What does that mean on a sociological level? What does that mean in general? And it disturbs me. Folklore disturbs me.
It's supposed to.
Yeah.
It's just part. It's not what it's all about, but that is certainly a component of folklore. I mean, so often people die at the end of the story, or even halfway through the story.
Yeah.
or a bad end will come to them or others in the story, and that's part of it. Part of the folklore is a teaching aid.
Yes.
It's teaching you about aspects of life, and many aspects of life are not very pleasant, and you're going to die. And that tell you what, we're cheering everyone up tonight, aren't we?
Aren't we?
And that's part of what it's about. And if you're not disturbed by some of these stories, well, you're not getting it. Even you mentioned the update of the Green Children of Woolpit in the Hag story. I don't know, I haven't read it, so I don't know whether they stick to the fact that the boy dies.
Yes, they do.
Pretty soon, the boy dies, and in the original story, there's quite a strong insinuation that the girl becomes a little bit wanton in her ways.
Oh yes, that's included. Yeah.
And it's so there you go. There's two lessons. These innocent children come out from the cave in Woolpit. The boy lasts a little while, and then he dies, dead, at a young age, and the girl grows up from that innocence into
not so innocent.
Not maybe not such a great person. So there you go, two lessons for the price of one.
I find that interesting though, because that shows the blurring of the boundaries between I suppose folklore that we believe has some element of truth in the fact that they existed, or they were believed to be in existence. It's not just that kind of druidic bardic tale that and there's no real kind of grip to it that we can get into on a real plane. But I find it's like the Wollerton Gnomes, isn't it? It's like, that is a folk tale, but it's also something that really happened, that there are elements of it at least really happened.
I think a lot of these folk tales will have a core of reality to them, and then you have allegorical overlays to make it a good story.
Nice word, Neil. I like that. Can you explain allegorical? I can't even say it.
Allegorical.
This is tea. Yeah, this is tea, by the way.
Yeah. Oh well, it's something that oh God, how do I explain allegorical? It's taking something that is real fundamentally, maybe an everyday level, and making it mythological,
Yeah.
symbolic, so that it means much more than just the everyday. It's not just a story, oh, boy falls in love with girl, they live happily ever after, or they both
And with
die.
pigs. With
With
pigs.
pigs, yeah, with pigs. um, there's another level to it.
Yes.
So often people will talk about, the stories from the Old Testament, the biblical
Mm.
stories of Genesis. Was the earth created in 6 days? No, it probably wasn't. But as an allegory for the creation of existence and reality and life, Genesis is not a bad allegorical tale. So there's an instance of probably the biggest instance of an allegorical tale, and that's what folk tales
Mm.
do. The folklore, fairy stories, a little bit different than some of the sort of more straightforward folk
Mm.
tales. There's a difference, but they all have certain levels, that allegorical storytelling overlay to make that. That's why they've existed for so long. If it was just a sort of
Yes.
boring story without that, it wouldn't have existed for so long, because it wouldn't
Mm.
have made for such a great story.
Yeah, totally agree. And I had a million running through my head then, especially sort of Carradwin's Cauldron and that kind of thing, which are absolutely fascinating. They're the ultimate puzzle box for me for unpicking and undoing. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. If anybody has any books that you have read that you think are worth the read, and want to throw some ideas in our direction, if you think that we probably haven't got them, I say probably, I probably haven't got them, but as you can see from the scholarly wall, I couldn't say that earlier either, behind Neil, the book nerd wall behind Neil, Neil probably has got a copy. But if there's anything that you want us to review that you think might be interesting for us to review, we'll be more than pleased to sort of get hold of that and give you an opinion. Do I recommend Hag? I definitely do. I definitely do. It's beautifully written. I'm definitely going to go out and buy Hodson's. Come on, tell me what it was again, Neil.
The
Something of the
king,
gods.
the kingdom of the gods.
Kingdom of the Gods. You know what? I'm going to remember that now because I just had an image of Jason and the Argonauts. Brilliant.
It's very different than Jason and the Argonauts. And like I say, if for a more light-hearted and easier read, Hodson's Fairies at Work and Play. That's, I don't know what edition that is. It's very easy to find. Is a much easier easier read. And it's just talking about the fairies rather than going into the Sephiroth of angelic hierarchy, which is just before, hold on, before we end it, this book, just the expense that has gone into it. So in order to describe the Sephiroth, we have
A
the
pull
10
out
in
page.
a full pull out pages. I mean,
Wow.
how many publishers would do that these days? So it's
Did
just,
he have did he have connections with a lot of people by any chance?
well, it's the Theosophical Society. They had loads of money. He was part of it, and so
Um,
he wanted to publish it. And yeah, we'll spend loads of money on it. Even though I'm sure it had very small circulation. It would never have been a sort of best-selling book to warrant that kind of expenditure. But it didn't matter to them because, well, we've got loads of money. Let's just put this book together and tell people tell people what you think. Yeah, no,
Brilliant.
brilliant. Yep.
Excellent stuff. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And just on a quick note, it's what date is it today? 5th of March?
That's right.
5th of March. So, over the weekend, we broke our 2,000 mark on the
Well done.
subs.
Yeah,
No,
brilliant,
well done,
brilliant,
you. Well done.
brilliant.
I've always said, this is an organically growing situation for us, and I do like that. But if you're watching and you do enjoy it, if nothing else, it makes me and Neil really happy when we get new subs, because it's like people are actually genuinely interested in hearing us ramble on for 3/4 of an hour at a time or whatever. But we do have some brilliant guests. But it's so nice to know who's out there. And I think our very last video that we did probably had the highest amount of comments on, and thank you so much for everybody who welcomed us back after a period of hibernation. So thanks for everybody commenting on that. It was really sweet, and we do always read them. I go through them as soon as they're pinging my email box. I read them, and yeah, it's quite sad really, because I get super excited that people are connecting through this. It's nice.
Well, it's great. It's difficult, these days. Every bloke and his mate as a YouTube channel and a podcast, and it's difficult to actually get that momentum. And it's not all about, oh well, I've got so many subscribers, on the best podcast. It's just the mere fact that we've got over 2,000 people who seem genuinely interested in a subject matter that we are both passionate about and want to talk about, want to share things with people. That's fantastic. And so I echo Kate's words in saying, thanks to everyone for tuning in, for subbing, for making the comments, and you'll never guess
what's in the goblets.
The goblets.
Let's see how many psychic people there are out there who can guess what's in the goblet. In fact, there'll be small kind of shout out mention to anybody with the weirdest theories, but do keep them, above board, because I can see where that could go. Anyway, on that note, thanks, Neil. That has been really interesting. So thank you so much for sharing that book with us, and we'll both see you very, very soon.